How's it going, everybody? Shoot. Okay, just gotta make sure. I just got a small mess. Small. I heard this. I seen this video, and it was about the church and pastors getting arrested in church. Now, I don't like the idea of pastors being arrested, especially for doing things that aren't illegal, you know. But I seen them like doing this weird thing, like with the COVID, and that they're not spreading out, they're not wearing their masks, and they say it's an attack on religious freedom. Now, mind you, I don't know what the other religions are doing. I don't know if they're participating in their religious stuff and that they're not being criticized, but it just doesn't make sense if in the Bible, from what I understand, what is it, Romans 14, to obey your government, like Romans 12, but you got to obey your government, right? And I just feel like we just so constantly gassed up about the government taking away our religious freedom and stuff like that, to the point where we just miss basic stuff. Like, this is a health crisis. This isn't like where those a moment where, oh dang, they're gonna like, for instance, in earlier with the LGBT the transgender pronoun law. I don't know what it's called, but that would be like a clear indication, like, okay, they're forcing you to say stuff, to be considered of a certain group. And I'm like, okay, that's iffy, because it doesn't promote consideration. It just promotes like a sense of strong arm, a sense of coercion, when it should just be it should be an eventual social etiquette that's like, hey, call a dude or a female by their pronouns. Like, that shouldn't be like, yo, it shouldn't be like shouldn't be a law enforcement thing, as far as I understand. You know, it should just be like one of those things. And again, it depends on the person. Like, you know, some people can accept a transgender person, some people can't. And it's in my opinion, it's a lifestyle choice. But it made me think about, so I gotta make this turn real quick. Alright. It just made me think how weird it is, because I'm like, we just so like gassed up and afraid of this pandemic that he's okay. About this whole pandemic, that when it comes down to very simple things like consideration for your neighbor, you know, loving your neighbor, that's biblical. Why is it that people are why is that a hard concept in the church? Like I just feel like over the years we've had it where the church could have exercised no-brainer things. Just, man, this would be very good for the church to join in. And I'm not saying accept the world's values or whatever, but I am saying that this would have been like a home run for Christians to be like, yeah, we're loving our neighbor, and we're going out and over and beyond to love our neighbor. Because, I mean, especially in these churches, these people aren't necessarily poor. They're living, they're pretty well off. But it just is. Instead, they have this weird entitlement about, hey, they're gonna take away our rights. Hey, we have to be here. We have to sing. I'm like, no, you don't. When you travel and commute to work, you listen to worship music. When you're in your house and having your personal Bible study, you might play a worship song or two. You might stream a service. I've been to a church where they stream a service, and that was essentially like an extension branch, or they had essentially a church there. And again, when 3 or more gather, he is there, right? So I'm like, the church, ecclesia, I think it's ecclesia, means to be called out, you know? So it's like those called out. So it just don't make no sense for Christian churches who just weirdly violating the CDC laws. Like, this isn't one of those like China, like in China, their government is really out there oppressing other people groups and minorities, Christians, Muslims, whatever, where they have to be underground. Here and in Canada, You don't have to go underground. You just have to spread out a little more and put on a mask. That's really not being oppressed. That's not being oppressed. You have an option. And to say no, you just being difficult. That's not really Christian as far as I can tell. And it's actually annoying. Like, in my opinion, that's annoying. Because it's just like, I just seen this video and it just annoyed me. Because I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and play this whole, because I'm a Christian. And I'm not going to play this whole game of like, the non-believers telling you how a believer should be. I don't like that. You know, because they say, you should be this way. You should be that way. You should be more loving and be how, whatever. Like, even though they're not a Christian, they're telling you how to be a Christian. Like, I find that to be nonsense. But I'm like, yo, if you're a Christian and you have to do the right thing, like, if you really think it's a problem, why not have small churches? Meet up with people. Talk to people. You know, have your mask because you're trying to practice social distancing. And if you want to chance it, I say, hey, there you go. Because I had COVID, and COVID was a nightmare, man. So I'm like, if these people want to chance it, that's fine. But I'm like, don't sit here and say, oh, we're being persecuted. They're not letting us in our churches. And some of them say, oh, well, they didn't get COVID. I'm like, that's great. If the Lord's grace has kept them from having COVID, that's cool. But be above reproach. That's really my thing. Like, this whole fighting for religious freedom type thing, at least in this instance, I've seen it work and it's been working good. But in this instance, I feel like they dropped the ball. Because it's not being above reproach. It's actually not. It's actually making y'all come off as like, you know, we don't care. We actually, like y'all just causing trouble for no reason. And I hate that, man. Because I'm like, especially over this political turmoil, these past few elections in America, it just shown how tone deaf the church has seemed to be in the West. Just so tone deaf.